Hello everyone, this is Dorka Nagy-Józsa, head of Y2Y Hungary Ltd. And our today's guest is Timm Urschinger, who is head of LIVEsciences AG from Switzerland. Hello Tim, hope you had a safe travel, right?
Yeah, thank you, Doc. I was indeed an easy travel, just sitting in the same place, right?
Yes, absolutely. So self-defined salaries and self-managed organization, this will be our today's topic. So my first question, is it a real thing?
Depends where you look at, I guess. So for us, it is. We're a fairly small company, of course, but we do have a self-organized setup. So there's no line management. There's not a traditional org chart. And indeed, we set our salaries ourselves. Everyone in the company does. Doesn't matter if you just joined a week ago or if you're here for 5 years. It's all the same. Everyone sets the salary themselves. Yeah.
And are you equally satisfied with this setup? Or should I ask the others, right?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we do have discussions, obviously, around improving the whole setup, the whole organizational setup all the time. And that's part of the idea, of course. It should be an evolutionary system. For the salaries itself, we also do have discussions. I think also last year in October, we had a discussion if we should keep that process of self-defined salaries, if we should change it, more like a panel or some kind of little group deciding for everyone. So there are questions coming up, and it's definitely not the most comfortable setup, especially the self-set salaries part is challenging at times as well.
And so this is a valid option for a newcomer, if I'm understanding right.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if we go through the recruiting process and kind of the interviews, although they look a bit differently from bigger corporations, probably, that's not completely self-defined. So if you would sign a contract, there is part of the process is similar to what we do in the company operations, but it's not completely free, of course, because you lack certain context of how the company operates. But we did have, I think, one of us joining in October or November last year. And actually the conversations around the salary for this year we had in December. So she was only there for 6-8 weeks or something and was full part of the discussion.
Wow. So would you advise to work like this for everyone?
No. Easy answer, no. I think the salaries part is probably one of the things that I would touch the last, especially if you have an existing company and you need to transform and change how you work. There's probably other things you want to tackle first. I mean, one thing is how do your strategic objectives link to more agility, self-organization, and all these kind of things. And then obviously the other question is, what is your structure looking like? For bigger corporations, you probably have a global compensation process. You probably have something or performance management and bonuses and so on. So salary might not be the easiest thing to change first. And usually it's also one of the more sensitive topics. So it's probably easier to start with other things first.
Okay. And if I know well, then you are doing already some till shifting and some agile shifting and transformation project as well. So we've read a lot of books about all these till and agile and more agile and even more agile. And some part of it, it's a simple bullshit, right? And the other one is definitely working. So how could you wrap up the benefits of these initiatives?
I think what I said before, the most important thing is what are your strategic objectives? And I like the Kinevin framework, for example, from Mr. Snowden. So if your goals are more in the complex area and not so much in the complicated one, then probably this whole agility, self-org teal thing makes sense because you want to be quicker, you want to have shorter cycles, you want innovation, you want probably to react to market change or whatever other changes out there. And then the benefits are simply that you probably reduce the bureaucracy, you probably reduce hierarchical levels if you have a transformation as well, which means you bring the decision more to a level where people actually know and have the interaction with customers or suppliers or whatever else, right? So there's definitely a benefit in speed of decision making. So it's also an efficiency gain. I think the other part probably is the engagement. So there's Gallup studies out there which suggest that more than $1 trillion a year are lost due to not engaged people at work, and more self-organized, more autonomy, more engaging cultures should reduce that amount of money lost or of that resource wasted. So that's definitely another benefit. And I think the other thing is probably innovation. I mean, if we talk about these knowledge worker kind of jobs that most of us have at the moment that we're discussing these kind of changes, then obviously you need to have a certain freedom, certain autonomy, like for example, the Google Friday for innovation and playing around, right? you need to have that kind of freedom to create new ideas. It's not like you just send me an invite and we say from 5 to 6, let's have a great new idea. I mean, that's not how it works, right? So that's definitely some of the benefits. And then it depends on the team as well. I think there's so many different aspects that just play into that whole field.
And depend on the leadership style the organization already has, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have a colleague here in Basel, and he always says, I can boil down any problem in the organization down to a leadership problem. And I think he's probably right with that one.
Absolutely. If I'm a leader of a large organization and I'm thinking about that kind of transparency you've already reached with that self-defined salaries, then what would you advise as a first step for moving at the direction?
Yeah, so definitely don't make the salaries transparent in the first step.
Okay,
that's probably not a good idea. No, so I think with the transparency, there's also the part that you need to take care of, increasing the knowledge and probably experience that people need to have to read the numbers, to look at the different information that they're getting, because many have not been exposed to these kind of things. And that means it could be overwhelming. If you make it more transparent, could also mean you want to push down the decision making. Obviously, that means how do I read the data or the information that I'm getting? So that's definitely a really important thing. You could start anywhere, really. I mean, if you're working for a consultancy company like we do, probably talk about the capacity, the allocation of resource, these kind of things. I think the financial aspects are really important to make transparent for any setup. So if you're part of a big corporation, we probably talk about business unit results and not so much about the big thing. But that's also really important. And people need to understand the mechanics of these numbers as well. That's the most important part, right? And obviously, if I need to take a decision in a self-organized setup, that means 1, I need to have the information, and 2, I need to know how to interpret and how to read it, and then coming to a decision. So again, any information is good to start with. The HR, the people-sensitive data, obviously is the last one to take.
Okay, and what would you say about the timing of these shifts? How long is it?
It's a good question. I think it depends on the organization, of course, right? It depends where you're coming from. It depends how big the organization is. If we work with bigger corporations, 100,000 people in 100-something countries, then obviously we would usually look at creating smaller islands and not go like Big Bang type of everyone, because that's fairly impossible, I would say. But if you create islands of whatever, 300, 400, 500, maybe 1,000 people, then you can go on the journey. Depends on the approach that you're taking, and again, where you're coming from. But cultural change, and at the end of the day, it's a cultural change. It takes 3 to 5 years, and that's nothing new, right? We know that for 30, 40 years already. Obviously, you will have certain benefits. Obviously, you will have things implemented, hopefully way before year 5, right? Probably like 6 months, 9 month time frame is realistic if you want to redesign and reimagine how you work.
And do you suggest to do pilots first then as an island? Or do you suggest to move the whole organization one by one?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question with the other colleagues in that field. It's kind of a philosophical one almost. I think both options are viable depending on the size. I would always recommend doing pilots and experiments in smaller groups if we are talking about some 100 people or more, because then probably gets too big as a first step. Because the difficulty about teal, agility, self-organization is really abstract, because we have not worked with these kind of paradigms before. And it means it's good theory, and we talk and people listen maybe, right? And then they get another theory on another theoretical input. So I think it's really important to just do it as quickly as possible and get your own hands-on experience and feeling and how it really looks like. And that said, experiments and pilots are probably a good way to do that.
As you work in many countries around the globe, what's your experience regarding the culture differences?
Yeah, cultural aspects obviously play into that field. I mean, human beings working together means we all have our experiences, our cultural heritage and all that. On the other hand side, we do see teal examples, self-organization, agility, or whatever other kind of movement you're following across the globe in any country of the world. So it seems it's possible anyway. But of course, living in Germany, being German, there's certain things that you probably would do differently here compared to the US, or maybe in Scandinavia, or maybe in Japan. So you should have a look at that stuff. And yet, it's always about the how you do the things anyway. So for any company even, right? You will have microcultures. It's not like the one company culture. It's always microcultures. So you need to take care of that, which is also why I'm not a big fan of blueprints and frameworks and copy paste it. You always need to customize what you're doing there.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, we do not have much time today, but what would you advise as a forum to follow if you are, if I'm more interested and deeper interested in that topic?
Well, there's many good forums out there. If you follow LinkedIn, there's a ton of good stuff and a ton of good material. Also, last year, I think with the COVID pandemic, there's a lot more virtual things. I personally am part of the organizing team of what's called the Teal Network, and we are organizing the Teal Around the World conference, which is coming up in March 4th and 5th. We'll have really nice names there with Ricardo Semler, Frederick Laloux, Joost de Blok, many of the big and small companies joining, really pioneering ideas as well. Also outside business, outside industry, which I think is always incredibly interesting to see. So yeah, definitely tealaroundtheworld.com obviously is a good one. But again, there's so many nice webinars and all sorts of things out there at the moment.
What we can learn from. Okay. Thank you for today's Timm, and thank you for being available for today's conversation.
Sure. Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.